The Department of Education restarts today collecting federal student loans in default after the long pandemic-era pause, leaving millions of Americans worried they could have their paychecks or benefits garnished. A new study by TransUnion shows a significant number of Americans with student loan debt are seriously behind on their payments. CNN's Matt Egan is with me now. Wow, what are you learning from all this? Because having your paycheck garnished is a big thing if you simply can't afford to repay it right now.
Yeah, sir. Look, this is a real problem. And this new research suggests that, yes, a lot of people who are stuck with student debt are struggling just to get by. So TransUnion found that just over 20% of all federal student loan borrowers who have money due are seriously delinquent. That is defined as 90 days or more past due. Now, this translates to about 4 million people. And when we look at the trend, you can see that this is the highest level on record, up from 11% back in February 2020, just before COVID. It takes out the previous record high of 15% back in September. Now, what's notable here is that TransUnion only looked at federal student loan borrowers, not private.
Right.
And they're excluding people who have deferment plans or who are already in forbearance. So this is really people who owe money and are not paying. Now, why is that? Suggests that some people may not be able to pay, right? Some people may be deciding not to pay, and others might not realize that they owe money again. Because remember, there was this pause back in March of 2020 during COVID-19 where federal student loan payments plus collections and interest were all suspended because of the health crisis.
Right.
There were a number of extensions, and then in late 2023, payments started to become due again, but they were given this 12-month on-ramp, this grace period to start to make those payments again. And starting today, the Department of Education is resuming collections. And look, this is a real issue for some people. I talked to a 29-year-old in Southern California, and he told me that he's got about $12,000 in student debt. He doesn't owe anything right now because he's on one of these income plans, but he's got 2 different jobs just to try to get by, and he's got credit card debt. And he said, look, I voluntarily took on student debt, but it adds up way more than you expect. He said, it feels like I'm drowning.
Well, I know one thing is that this can impact your credit score, can it not?
Absolutely.
Yes.
It can do real damage to your credit score, which could make it more expensive later in life to borrow, like to try to get a mortgage.
That's right. Matt Egan, thank you so much.
Sarah.
I really appreciate it.
Okay, starting today, if you have a federal student loan in default, you're going to have to start paying it back once again. The Education Department is warning that it's resuming collections on those loans. This could lead to millions of people having their benefits and wages garnished if they don't start paying again. In a recent op-ed, Education Secretary Linda McMahon defended her decision to do this, writing, quote, "Debt doesn't go away. It gets transferred to others if borrowers don't pay their debts to the government. Taxpayers do." So joining me now to discuss, Preston Cooper. He's a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. Good morning, Preston.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Okay, we know the administration wants to start collections again. There had been a pause during the pandemic, et cetera. But what is involved in doing that? Is the department actually ready to make these collections, given the cuts to the department? I know that AEI has done some assessments where they're saying the program's in complete disarray, is plagued by administrative failures.
So today's action to resume collections on defaulted loans was really only a matter of when, not a matter of if. They were going to have to do this eventually because the government needs to get its money back if students are not paying their loans. But as you mentioned, this is going to be an administrative challenge to actually restart collections on the loans. Most of the actual collecting at this stage will be done by the Treasury Department, so they'll be affected less by some of the cuts. But this was always going to happen. If students are not paying back their loans, there do need to be consequences for that. And so Linda McMahon was going to have to turn the collection system back on eventually. And it should have been done, honestly, years ago. But now is as good a time as any.
Democratic Congressman Ro Khanna is among those arguing for continued forgiveness of student loans. He writes this: restarting loan payments now will cause credit scores to plummet and risk millions of Americans' ability to participate in the economy. And I want to ask you about this because there's also this plan I think that Republicans are talking about in the next budget bill. Where economic hardship deferments for new borrowers after July 2025, those would end. I mean, you're talking about borrowers who could face like repayment right when the economy is hurting or if they're facing financial hardship.
Well, so Republican proposals to reform the student loan program preserve an important feature of it, which is called income-driven repayment. And that means that if you have loans and your income goes up or down, say due to a recession, your payments will go up and down with your income. So you have a lower income, you get a lower payment. And the Republican plans preserve this. But they also add an extra benefit to that, which says that if you cannot make the interest payments on your loan, if you cannot fully cover the interest, they'll actually waive that unpaid interest, and they'll even credit your principal balance by a little bit to ensure that if you keep up with your payments, if you do the right thing and pay your loans, you'll see your balance go down over time and you'll pay off your loans faster.
One of the things that surprised me is the high number of people who are delinquent who are 45 and up, right? People who are in their 50s, people who are in their 60s, parents who have debt. They could be in a position, I think I see 37% of older borrowers in debt. What concern should we have about this repayment kicking in and these changes happening to these programs, honestly, to a large number of people who are at retirement age, right? Who are at the age when they might just frankly end up on social safety net programs?
Well, we certainly need to make sure that this return to repayment transition is managed appropriately for all borrowers, older and younger, to make sure that people have the resources and the support they need to get back into the habit of repaying their loans. But the Republican proposal would also limit how much debt colleges can force on older borrowers. They would limit the Parent Plus program, which currently allows colleges to force effectively unlimited debts on parents and grandparents. They would cap that amount so that wealthy colleges can no longer force families to borrow, up to their eyeballs, loans that they're probably never going to be able to pay back.
Preston, I want to ask you one more thing before you go, because I think what's interesting is this reform effort is on the way. But in the meantime, there's lots of people who are locked into this debt now. Is this just a generation that is going to be lost to this debt? The idea is while you're trying to get colleges to pay more, the folks who are on the hook are just officially on the hook and that's it.
Well, the Republican plan would allow current borrowers to transition into their new repayment plan, which again, allows borrowers to pay down their debts a lot faster because it waives that unpaid interest and provides that credit towards your principal. By my calculations, the typical borrower would pay off their debt in just 11 years compared to 20 years under President Biden's plan. So I hope that if this plan were enacted, that would enable more borrowers to get out from under their debt and move on with their lives.
Preston Cooper, Senior Fellow at the American Enterprise Institute.